Alright, I got them all marked out. You can see the lines are nice and even, so when I drill my holes, they're all going to be in the exact same spots. If you're ever going to do any woodwork, you've got to have a carpenter's square. My dad gave me this one, and I remember him having it when I was tiny. This thing's old, very old. You know, if they're taken care of properly, they'll last forever. One of the fun things about it is this. It's got measurements all over it, inches. I'm sure you can buy a metric one now, but when this one was made, the United States didn't do metric. To get straight lines, you run the steel edge parallel with your board and overlap it a little bit, and then you just draw your mark along there. And you get a nice straight line. Not only that, I was saying, I'm lining that up there. You can see at the 3-inch mark, there's that line. 6-inch mark, there's that line. And if we go 4.5 inches over to 10.5, there's that line. It's real simple to mark, measure with one of these. They're great if you're doing woodworking. So, get one. Okay? You won't be disappointed you did. Got the drill bits, about to put the drill press up here and start drilling all these little holes. Back in a bit. Okay, now when picking a drill bit out for screws, you want to pick a smaller drill bit than the screw, like this one here. If I turn it and look at them on the end, you can tell that screw is much fatter than that drill bit, and that's fine. You want the screw to have something to bite into, so if I were to use one of these bigger drill bits, I'm taking away the screw's holding power, because they're the same size as the screw. So when I look at it, I want to make sure that the screw is much fatter than the drill bit. In fact, I'm not going to use that one. That one's too big. I'm going to use an even smaller one of these tiny ones here. Okay? Simply because I know I don't need a huge drill bit for this, so I'm not going to use it. Alright, I'm going to get drilling. Again, the drill is just to give me a pilot hole for the screws. So when I put the screws in, they go in right. So I'll be back in a little bit. Okay, I have all the pilot holes drilled. Now, I'm going to explain something. Why am I drilling pilot holes? One, when I go to put these screws in, they're going to follow the pilot holes. So if the pilot holes aren't straight, they're not going to go straight. If there's no pilot hole, they can go wherever they want. They typically will. Second reason is if I were to just try to put these screws in the wood, I'm liable to split the wood. Now, the ends are softer than the ends are softer. This is where the split will come. If you're going to split the wood, it's going to be the ends. I'm not going to pre-drill pilot holes in the ends because these screws aren't going in very far. They're only going to go in about that far. Alright, I'm going to go get the driller, Mr. Driller, that's what BB calls him, and start setting up all these screws in this so I can start putting this thing together. I'm also going to get a piece of sandpaper and get rid of the pencil marks. Now, one thing to keep in mind when you drill, one side's going to be nice, the other side where the drill bit comes through gets raggedy. This end should be going to my joint. This end should be out where everyone can see it. That's why I had to sand the pencil marks off. I'll be back in a little bit. Watch where you walk. I just knocked some boards over. Anyhow, I was sanding with this. I didn't do a 100% good job. You can still see some of the marks. And I got fed up and got that out and started sanding it with that. You got to be careful with the belt sander because you will just take the end off your fingers and everything really quickly. You can see where I got this corner a little too harsh with it. I mean, it'll just gnaw something down to nothing in a couple of minutes. So you got to be really careful with belt sanders. Anyhow, just letting you know, sand it. And one of the reasons why I got the belt sander out is I hit these edges right here with the belt sander to take the square off of them. Splinters. I don't want splinters in my hands. BB's going to be reaching in there. Who knows who else is going to be reaching in there. Let's get the edges where they don't splinter your fingers. Okay? I just found one of these boards I did not sand. That one. So it's a spare, I know, but I'm going to go ahead and sand it. So I'll be back in a few minutes because I'm about to start with Mr. Driller and putting this thing together. Okay, I got all my drills, all my screws put in place. It's ready for me to start assembling the boards together. One thing, these screws I'm using, they say no pre-drilling. No pre-drilling, yes, in 3 languages. But you have to use a special bit on it, power bit. And boy, this bit grips into those screws like I would not believe. I'm not used to it gripping like that. It picks the whole board up with it, and I have to use both hands to pull it apart. Well, anyhow, I'm going to try to put the first board together. A little worried about it. I'm probably going to get some wood clamps and clamp everything down to this table so things don't move on me. I'll show you that in a minute. Okay, I've got the first two clamped to the table, and I'm doing this because I want them to go together properly and I don't want them running around on me. I'm looking for the carpenter square, which I put over here on top of the Sky Spy kite, which it's windy enough today to fly. I can check the corner. Looks pretty square to me. Okay, so I'm going to put those two screws in, those first two screws in. I'm going to do the same thing for this end up here and putting this piece on that end because I want to make sure this is all square. Once that first piece is square, the side ones will go together a little bit easier because they're going to fit in there pretty tight. I'll be back in a second. Okay, and what I was afraid of, I split the wood on this one. I'm going to put a little bit of glue on it and it should be okay. It's just something I was worried about, but they went together pretty well. Didn't have too much trouble with it. So now I'm going to do this end over here and just be careful when you do it. I didn't countersink the holes, so the screws are going to stick out on the ends. The wife won't like that, but it is what it is. If I pull those screws out later, one at a time, I can countersink them and put them back in, but I split that wood. So I don't want to mess with that too much. So let me get this one over here done. One other thing I forgot to talk about is the torque setting on your drill. I got my torque setting really low so I don't crack the wood, and I'm splitting the wood on the ends of this one too. I had the torque setting on 15 because I wasn't thinking, so it went in a little too hard. I got this one end bolted in, so I'm going to hit that end over there. I'm going to flip this thing over. Once I get that end in, the cross braces will go fast, and I will be working on putting the back on. So I'll be back in a few minutes. All right, I got the outer frame done. Now to start putting the cross pieces in. This is where it's going to get a little stronger or weaker. Hard to say, but it's already stronger than it was simply because all four pieces are on. I can tighten up the joints a little bit as well. I'll be back in a minute. I'm going to start putting the cross pieces in and show you how that works. Again, this side went in much better than the other side. No split wood. Practice makes perfect. That's all I got to say on that. This is the fourth and fifth one, so they would go a little bit better. The clamps help a lot too. Clamping it down to the table keeps it from moving. I'll be back in a minute. Well, I started putting the screws in the back, and I don't like them. The heads stick up too much. I'm going to have to pull them out and countersink them. And that's a lot of work. So I went and got some finishing nails. And I'm going to use the wire nails instead of these screws to fasten the back onto it because, well, I'm going to have to use twice as many of those. They're not as heavy duty as the screws, but I want to have this lip sticking up on my screws. And I don't really want to sit here with a screwdriver and countersink. And with these guys, I won't have to countersink. So I'm going to get busy on it, and I'll be back in a little bit. It's about 4:15 right now, and I started this project at 2 o'clock. So this is not a real time-consuming project, and I'm near done with it. I'll show you the other side of it in a minute. I don't think I can win for losing. Nails have their problems too. If you don't drive them in straight, or they bend, that one bent as it was going in, they don't line up right. I'm going to go back to the screws. They're quicker. This is the back of it. Who's going to see it? It's going to be up against the wall. So I'm just going to go back to the screws. They're quicker, and they're going to hold better. So, yeah. I'll be back in a bit. Alright everyone, I got my screws put in the back of this thing. Let's turn it over and see how bad I missed some of them. Because I feel like I did. Oh, one-handed. That's not so light. Well, what do you know? I didn't miss any of them. Yeah, I did. One right there, splitting the wood. 1 out of 12 or 13 is not too bad. Not too bad at all. I can just back that one up and move it over a little bit. Put a piece of bottle on there and you'll never notice it. Now, what's my total cost for this? Right at $50. Total amount of time is probably 3 hours. I still got to drill mounting holes on this to mount it on the wall with. But I got to find the studs and figure that out, and I'm going to do that inside, up in the hobby room. But will it hold my paints? Took them in the house already. We'll find out. This top one is so widely spaced, I can't see how it won't hold about anything I want. I'm not too disappointed with it. It's looking fairly decent. It's going to hold a decent amount of paint. I got some screw-ups on the ends, no doubt. How to fix those? You don't really. I was rushing it too much. I'll be honest with everyone. If I were to slow down, take my time, make this a whole weekend project, it would look a lot better than it does now. And I do mean a lot better. Use nails instead of screws, that sort of thing. I could make this thing look really good. I wasn't really in that much, well, didn't want to take all weekend on it. Let's just put it that way. Most of the wood was pre-cut. I had to cut about, I don't know how much I cut off the ends. I'll be honest, because I eyeballed it. Well, anyhow, there's pretty much a completed paint rack. I'm going to take it upstairs and figure out how to mount this thing on the wall. Get some wall anchors, drill some holes, get her up on the wall, and start putting paints up on it. Because that's what I want to do. Rub it down with some tung oil. I forgot about that part. Get these stickers off of it. Well, that sticker's not coming off. It goes under the rim. Yeah, it does. Okay, so I'll be back in a little bit. Well, here's a completed paint rack. 4 foot long, 2 foot tall. What I have left is figure out how to mount it on the wall. I went to my big box home improvement store and got some of these. These are 65 pounds each. These are 75 pounds each. I really don't think I'm hanging 150 pounds of paint rack on the wall with the paints and everything. So I think I can use 2 of those. And it should just be fine. I got to drill a couple holes in here in the plywood for mounting the points. I got to make sure I'm not drilling into studs, because these are not going to work in a stud. So I got to go get the stud finder. Once I get that done, get it marked out and laid out where it's going to go, I'm going to get it put on the wall. And I'll show you that. I'll show you the completed rack and come back with a conclusion. I use the stud finder to map out where the studs are. They are not evenly spaced, which is kind of strange, but there is a bathroom behind this. See? And then there isn't one for way back here. So I know where the studs are. Now I got to figure out where I want to put the paint rack. So that's the next question. I'll be back in a few minutes. Well, there you go. Paint rack is mounted on the wall. I mean, it took me 2.5 hours on Saturday. I put a varnish coat on, which took probably another 15-20 minutes. I used tung oil. And then probably another 10-15 minutes to hang it on the wall. It's up on the wall. Let me come back and show you some paint on it. It's not the prettiest thing I've ever made. This is far prettier. The spray booth. But, you know, I'm pretty sure it's going to be functional. Let's see. Well, there we go. Got the spray booth up. I mean, the paint rack up. One thing about it, I had more Tamiya paints than I thought, and a lot of duplicated colors. Part of that was the way I was keeping the paints. They were in little containers, and I never knew what I had. Now I'm going to know what I have. I think I have their entire paint line. I think I have the entire Alclad paint line, too. The Vallejo paints, they're not all going to go up there. I've got some in boxes there and some in boxes there. So just letting you see what this thing looks like. I gotta go. I gotta be somewhere else. I hope you enjoyed this. Now, I paid $50 for the wood for this thing and another $10 for the wall anchors. It was all pre-cut. I had to trim these down about an inch. Okay? And I did, the $50 did include the screws that I used to put the wood together with. You can do it cheaper. If you don't mind cutting these down, you can get a big one of these out of pine for almost nothing. So you could do this cheaper. I just didn't feel like cutting a whole bunch of wood. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll talk to you guys later.